Fabulous. I can see in my notification, Katie, that we've started, so we'll get a nice accurate record of our meeting. So now that we're recording, I will formally welcome everybody warmly to our Board of Directors meeting in public. So this, of course, is published and people are able to see our discussions and our challenge and our debate and the way in which we're looking at ourselves to provide the best services we can to the people of Bradford. Plenty on today. I'll begin with the people who are here, of course, or those that are giving apologies. So I do know about Matthew's apologies, and I think, am I right in thinking that we've got Chris here? Yes, I can see you're on the call, Chris. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, thanks, Max.
Great stuff. Good morning and welcome, and thank you for representing Matthew as Director of Finance today. That's great. And I do know that we've got apologies from a couple of our non-executive colleagues, from Louise, Professor Louise Bryant, and also from Mohammed. And John Prasher, I do note that you have some other commitments today that take you away from us in the afternoon. So I'm very grateful to you for making it with us this morning. Thank you. Have I missed any other apologies that I've perhaps not been notified of just yet? Do we think otherwise? And colleagues, have you been able to look around the virtual room? Have we got everybody else here? Okay, which means it's a great turnout, and I will avoid therefore saying hello and good morning to everyone. Otherwise, we'll be spending another 5 minutes doing that, won't we? So, but that's great then. So just one executive director who's unable to join us today, and well represented by Chris, and then a couple of our non-exec colleagues not able to join us. So thank you very much, everybody, for that. Can I begin by offering another warm welcome, particularly to our observers? And because I've just got the list at the side of my face, it certainly was going to be Callum, Aisha, Daniel, and Liam, who are all graduate trainees at our teaching hospital and have expressed an interest in having a look at how the board work. I can see a couple are certainly here. Liam, I can see you on my screen. And so I will simply say hello to all of you who've been able to join us, and you are most welcome. And do know, please, of course, it's a virtual meeting and we can see you're listed on here. Obviously, you're here as observers. There's no offence taken if you want to dip out at any time. Unfortunately, it requires to be a long day with the amount of business that we really have to get through in a board meeting, and so it's not expected, of course, that you must stay with us. I hope you enjoy it, and of course would welcome any informal feedback later. So it's lovely to see you all, Callum, Aisha, Daniel, and Liam, and I do hope you enjoy being present and get a feel, perhaps, for the business of our hospital trust through the board of directors. So a warm welcome to you all. I'll just check. I can see there is some chat. Oh yeah, very good. Well, the chat message there anticipates my next warm welcome, which of course is to a wonderful consultant in palliative medicine, Lucy. Lucy, thank you so much for joining us, and we will indeed be beginning with you. Did you want to say a word of introduction from yourself as to your role and what you will be speaking to us about? And then I'll pause and deal with the rest of the business. So, Lucy, do you want to say good morning and hello, perhaps, and tell us who you are?
Thanks, Max. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me this morning. I'm Lucy Wild, a palliative medicine consultant. I've been in the trust just over a year now, and I've been invited today to talk to you about our new Marie Curie React pilot service. So thanks again, Max. Nice to meet you.
Lucy, fantastic. And it's such an opportunity because, of course, many of our exec colleagues will be seeing this day to day, but many of us as in the non-exec role need to understand what you're doing and the contribution in order that we can improve our own decision making, learning from you. So you are most welcome, and we look forward to hearing of the work you're doing there with React. So that's great stuff. This is a very positive part of the board meeting, hearing some of the clinical service unit input. So we'll learn from that. So Lucy, a warm welcome to you. Colleagues, looking at the agenda, I won't go through every single item on it, but you can see that we're going to begin with finance and performance issues, which will include an analysis of health inequalities as they relate to learning disability, which is great, protecting and expanding elective capacity, in quality and patient safety. We'll be taking the usual general reports, but also dealing with maternity and neonatal service updates. I'll have to be a little bit flexible there, won't I, given that Louise and Mohammed are not with us, so I'll just have to think about the way in which we can get the academy feedback there. However, maternity and neonatal services, of course, we will be spending some time on. With people, we'll have our normal general reports in terms of the report from the chair and an update from our Equality and Diversity Council. And with partnerships, well, we have a guest joining us there telling us about the Shipley Hospital update. Kind of a necessary decision really taken with the state of the building. As a Shipley resident, I can confirm to you that it's a difficult one, of course, but to deal with locally, because it means a little bit of extra travelling for people. But we will hear as to why that decision's been taken, and I commend it to you as a proper decision given the circumstances. Under audit and assurance, we will of course take the report from the chair, but we've also got to look at the annual report and approve the terms of reference, as well as looking at our risks that arise in audit and assurance. And then under governance, poor Laura always has this at the end, but in fact there are a couple of important matters to inviting our approval there, aren't there, in the board standing orders and the modern slavery and human trafficking statement. So it's a couple of important matters for us to consider and hopefully approve, as well as a couple of compliance updates that we'll be getting. And, you know, as always, once a year, use of the trust seal, used 8 times in our correspondence. So excuse me for, I hope I didn't read everything out, but what I need to do is make sure people have got the full agenda in order that I can properly ask whether there are any declarations of interest that we ought to note. So knowing what we're going to speak about so far, are there any particular declarations of interest, please, to be made? And you know the point I'm making there, whether you're deeply involved with something or there's any financial interest, of course, need to be recorded. Paul, please do come in.
Max, it's duly noted on the register of interest, but just because of the first topics about a Marie Curie supported project, it's just acknowledging that I'm a trustee of Yorkshire Cancer Research and a Macmillan volunteer. When Lucy did this presentation on execs, I declared the same interest, so I'm just making sure that we've got full transparency.
Thank you very much. Entirely appropriate you record that, Paul, and thanks for what you do there in those circumstances. So that's great. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Colleagues, before I turn to Lucy and through Saj in the first place, may I ask whether there is any other business I need to make time for today? We have quite a lot in the agenda, but of course I will always allow time if somebody brings something they need separately put in. Not yet. If it arises during the course of the meeting, absolutely no problem. We'll try and pick that up. Please just do advise me. Okay. So in the spirit of making sure everybody's orientated and we're ready to go, can I assume that with no further hands up, there was nothing else that anybody wanted to raise briefly or quickly before we begin our business? In that case, I will turn to Saj in the first place, just to introduce this getting to know one of our clinical services areas, which is going to be about the REACT work. So I will turn to Saj in the first place, please. Saj.
Thank you, Max, and thank you everyone for joining. So this is a presentation which we heard at exec team meeting a few weeks back, and Lucy and her colleague Claire Raymond, who's another one of our consultant palliative care colleagues, came and presented, and we thought it'd be a really good idea to share with the entirety of the board the great work that's happening with the REACT work that's going on within the organisation. Lucy's had already the opportunity to introduce herself, so I'm not going to take any more time of the board, but just simply hand over, and obviously we'll be happy to take any questions at the end.
Great stuff, Serge. Thank you, and a warm welcome again to you, Lucy. The floor's with you.
Thanks, Serge, and thank you to Katie, who is sharing my slides. So thanks for inviting me. What I plan to do, I think we've got 20 minutes in the agenda, is just to give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour of why REACT came about and what we've achieved in its first year, and then leave plenty of time for questions. Next slide, please, Katie. So firstly, I just wanted to set the scene really in terms of what does excellence in palliative and end-of-life care look like. At a national and system level, our strategic goals are really clear. We want each and every one of our population to have access to high quality personalised care. And the first step to delivering this is to recognise who within our population in Bradford is approaching that final year of life. And once we do that, we can then open those conversations to allow choice, essentially, as to what they want their care to look like and where they want to receive it. This is known as advanced care planning, and we know from research there's a huge body of evidence that those who are offered this choice and this conversation end up having a better quality of end-of-life care, which is aligned to their wishes, and are more likely to have that timely specialist palliative care support when they need it. But we know in Bradford we've got challenges in terms of achieving that goal. There are several. So firstly, there are large variations in terms of outcomes for patients at the end of life across Bradford district and Craven. We have patients in the inner city areas are much less likely to be known to our services. So our services don't reach those who all need it. If we extrapolate from some public health recent data, it tells us there are around 1,000 patients in Bradford that currently don't have access to palliative care. So there's a lot of work to be done. And as a symptom of this, when individuals reach a crisis in that last year of their life, they present acutely to the emergency department, and in the majority of cases require admission, and these are lengthy hospital admissions. That, in some part, tells us why we in Bradford are a national outlier in terms of the number of unplanned hospital admissions in that last year of life. This, most importantly, impacts upon our patients, but it also impacts on the acute trust, leading to stretched capacity in the emergency department, which we see on the ground. We have restricted bed capacity in our wards, and then the unnecessary hospital expenditure. Next slide, please, Katie. So how are we going to tackle this? The Marie Curie REACT service was really designed to help tackle some of these inequalities in access and provision to end-of-life care in Bradford. And it works by proactively identifying those patients in real need of palliative care input and providing an alternative to hospital admission through a multidisciplinary responsive service and a virtual ward in the community called Marie Curie REACT. It's funded as a 3-year pilot, which launched in June 2022 and has been awarded competitive transformation funding and support through a social outcomes contract. This funding approach is quite unique and offers a risk-free funding model to support those new and innovative programmes, whereby the funding is only repaid if we achieve the outcomes we set out to do. In terms of collaboration, this is the real success, I think, of this project. It's been a real, true collaboration between the Trust and Marie Curie. The aims of our service, alongside the provision of high-quality end-of-life care, are very much about widening our reach and also about reducing hospital admissions that aren't clinically needed. Next slide. So what does the service look like? Since its launch in 2022, we've got 2 broad arms. Firstly, we have a senior palliative care presence in the emergency department, where we assess, identify and treat those patients with palliative care needs. And we work really closely with our emergency department colleagues, supporting patients out of hospital into the second arm of the service, the community team, which is a multidisciplinary rapid response team of nurses, healthcare assistants. We have a physio and a palliative care consultant. Here we provide all the necessary care, medication, and most importantly, that emotional support and information for patients and their carers. And next slide. So to date, we've been identifying those patients and supporting them from the emergency department, but talking to partner organisations, we really recognise the need exists in the community. And our next phase, which we plan to launch in November, is to open to allow referrals from community services. So those patients don't have to present in ED before they can access our virtual ward. And we've been working really closely with Goldline and the Yorkshire Ambulance Service to sort of create the pathways to enable this. Next slide, please, Katie. So just to give you a bit of a flavour to bring it home as to the type of patient we're supporting, Peter is in his 60s with a long-standing lung condition, pulmonary fibrosis. Over the last 6 months, he's been in and out of hospital 4 times with repeated infections requiring oxygen and spending over 20 days in hospital. I saw him in the emergency department on his 5th admission, and he attended after calling an ambulance with an acute bout of breathlessness. There's a lot of fear between him and his wife about how to manage this. He'd been started on oxygen, was having antibiotics and fluids through a drip. And I sat with him and his wife and reflected on how the last 4 months had been. They'd had discussions between them clearly as to they didn't want this to be that last phase and how he spent it. And we discussed the options available, particularly with Marie Curie React, and that option to be at home, to have oral antibiotics if he was able, and to have the equipment, oxygen and medication that he needed. We put a plan in place also as to what he would want if things were to happen, get worse again, and he'd want to be at home, or if not, in the hospice. The React nursing team and physio team worked with Peter in the community to talk through pacing, empowering him to manage some of his medications, breathing techniques and support for his wife, and also to ensure he had the benefits that he was entitled to, which was a huge relief to him. He stabilised, fortunately, under the care of the React, and then was discharged a few days later to our colleagues in the community palliative care team. He enjoyed a good 2 months at home over the summer, spending time in the garden with his wife. And then, unfortunately, his condition changed for the worse in September. But at that point, he had a plan in place. Him and his wife knew what to do should he get worse. He contacted the community palliative care team and had a bed available in the hospice where he spent his final days with his wife. I think this story would have been very different had React not been in place at that time. So just next slide, please. If we just look at the outcomes for that first 12 months of our service, they're really encouraging. We've seen a 50% reduction in the time in hospital in the last year of life for those supported by the service. We've had huge support from Marie Curie Impact and Evaluation team who have conducted formal evaluations of our service, and that has shown overwhelmingly positive response for both patients and really strikingly for the staff in the emergency department. Patients have reflected on the value of that person-centred care, but the staff have really reflected on the value of our service, having a senior clinician to support those really distressing, complex decision-making in the acute setting, and to upskill them in terms of providing that quality end-of-life care in a really challenging environment. I think I've already touched on the strength of this service being very much a collaborative approach. And between the Trust and Marie Curie, and from the outset, I think one of our real successes is we've had a fantastic steering group from key stakeholders such as Yorkshire Ambulance Service, social care, and they've really shaped the project throughout its implementation. It's become a bit of a flagship service. The model has received a lot of interest nationally, and both from England, Scotland and Wales, similar palliative care services are thinking on how they can implement similar things. I've recently been successful in getting some NIHR research funding to look at the generalisable elements so that we can really share this practice more broadly. Next slide. Thank you very much for listening. If you just click on to the next slide, Katie, that's just a bit of feedback from our emergency department colleagues, who I think it's fair to say this project has been a huge success because of the way they have welcomed the team and worked so closely with us. So very much thank you to the ED colleagues.
Wow, Lucy, thank you so much indeed. Thank you very much for what you and your team do. And Lucy, you probably be aware of this. I'm sorry if I'm repeating something to you, but our Health and Care Partnership locally has a mission statement to put patients or people in control of their health and well-being. And it seems to me this is a brilliant example of that, of giving people some control. And of course, over a very sad period, but an important period. So well done. I just had one very quick question, and I'll defer to colleagues, which was about the your comments at the beginning of the presentation about previously unknown to services, that was a pattern that we have in Bradford. And Lucy, I just wondered whether, are there any general themes or patterns as to why that might be the case with us? I know that can be a deep question, and if it's a bit too deep, I get that. But I just wondered whether we'd made any attempt to try and establish why so many of our patients are perhaps previously unknown at the end of their lives.
Yeah, it's a really good question. There is across our place currently a health needs assessment looking at gaps in palliative and end-of-life care services. I think it's fair to say that certain communities don't present to their GPs and therefore aren't flagged as potentially approaching that final year of life. When they are flagged under the gold standards framework, they then have that extra safety net. Where it's fantastic across Bradford and Airedale. We have Gold Line, which is essentially a 111 service which prioritises those with end-of-life care needs. And we know that those patients in the inner city areas often aren't registered with Gold Line, so they don't have that. So there's a lot of work at the moment, both within research and as clinical services, to look at how we reach into those communities to offer that support. But yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, no, I entirely understand, Lucy, and I think I'm taking from that as well that there's a requirement for us all as partners in this to work together to find ways of engaging people at an earlier stage. Yeah, and I take your point about Gold Line, perhaps the reach improving. Yeah, thank you very much, Lucy. Yeah. Well, I'll open up for comments, thoughts, questions, but what a terrific presentation. Sarge, turning to you first, please.
Thank you, Max. And I was just wanting to highlight, and hopefully the board's picked up from there, the number of different boxes this service is able to tick off. Firstly, the massive difference this service is making to patients, and the story that Lucy's been able to share in terms of what would have happened otherwise without this service being in place for the patient that was at the centre of this, in terms of being in hospital potentially in the last days of life, and being worried and stressed and not being with loved ones. The impact it makes on our wider clinical teams and the support the palliative care team and the REACT team are able to offer the wider clinical team in terms of being able to manage these patients who are often very, very complex patients coming through into hospital at the point of exacerbation, and also the significant positive benefit that we're seeing in terms of admission avoidance and being able to care for patients in the right place at the right time. So I think for me, what came out really loud and clear, both at the time when we heard this at our exec team meeting, but also again when you see this at board, is all of the different elements that this service is able to address. So and that's just as part of phase one. And what's really exciting is phase two, when we open it up into the community and at a place level to really get feel for the impact that this will make. So I just wanted to stress the fact that it actually addresses a number of different areas, and to say a massive thank you once again to Lucy and her colleagues for all of the work that they've done to get this started. I think this is trailblazing work, and I'm sure nationally this will be viewed as really, really positively. So massive thank you again, Lucy.
emphasising the importance of the work, Sarge. Thank you. I was very articulate. Thanks. Mel, good morning. The floor's with you. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Lucy, and please convey our thanks to the whole team, because it is tremendous work. I was reminded in what you were describing in relation to the sort of the variation in the appreciation of primary care, of the existence of some of these people, and it chimes very strongly with a piece of work that we'll be hearing about later, that we discussed at great length in our Equality, Diversity and Inclusion and Inequalities Council, which is around the very late presentation of patients with life-limiting conditions, because they haven't necessarily accessed primary care to alert their clinicians to symptoms. And I'm sure when we get into phase 2, there'll be some learning from this that we can incorporate in the work that we've agreed to do as a consequence of our findings on this in the wider community through our Act as Well programme. So that was just an incidental that I kind of picked up through listening to the presentation, which was fantastic. Thank you for that. But my point is, you know, this is the opportunity when you come to the board, or indeed when we hear things as an exec team, to utilise our influence to overcome any blocks and barriers that you may be hitting. So my question is there anything that you would wish to flag up to us that we can make better in some way by exerting some of our influence and ability to direct? And I ask that not just as Chief Executive of the Trust, but as the place lead as well, because this clearly is something, most especially as we get into phase 2, an end-to-end process where we want to look at the patient on their whole journey and their whole life experiences, not just what happens in the Trust.
Thanks, Mel.
You've anticipated my question. That's great. Yeah. So what could we do? But with you, Lucy, thank you.
So just to pick up on the first point, in terms of trying to triangulate everything that's happening across the place. So we recognise we've got some national data that's fed into a Power BI chart on a monthly basis, looking at primary care networks across Bradford, and those that are really fantastic and those that need a bit of improvement in terms of identifying those patients in the last year of life. What we're hoping to do when we gather the data more comprehensively for REACT is feed that in so that we could triangulate those data points and then involve the PCNs with some education so that we actually impact upon the PCN activity and ours, so that we link in those two things. So I think that's a really good point. It'd be interesting to know what's happening later on in the board meeting. In terms of how as a board you can support this service, I think I recognise we are a pilot. The initial 12 months is looking really encouraging, but looking probably over next year about how we sustainably look for commissioning for this service. And we very much want to do that as a partnership commissioning. If I'm probably speaking the wrong language, but we want to do that as a true partnership, because I think that's where the success of this service lies. So looking for support in putting that in place over the coming 12 months would be fantastic.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you, Lucy. And so, Lucy, yeah, the work is already influencing the way we think, make decisions, and try to support the work. Ray, good morning. With you.
Thanks, Max. Lucy, thank you. It was a lovely presentation, and I'll just keep it very brief. I think this, for me, is one of the most notable developments that I've seen probably in the last couple of years in terms of the way we care for our patients and our communities as well. I think it's a really, really exciting project, and I think the social funding aspect of it, I think, gave us the confidence to go with it. It was a bit of a leap of faith, but I think the way this was done, I think, just gave us the confidence to support it. And I'm really glad we're able to do that. I think the palliative care team on the whole has been outstanding for well, certainly for the whole of my time in this role, right through COVID and beyond, you still continue to deliver fantastic care, and this absolutely typifies what you do. I think you've been an amazing recruit, Lucy, to the trust, and remember interviewing you, and I think what you've delivered along with Claire and the rest of the team has been absolutely outstanding. I think this is one of those rare things that we often have to maintain the balance between quality of care and the money, and try and get those two things squared away. This is one of those rare things that actually delivers on all fronts, really. It saves bed days, it saves money, but most importantly, it provides fantastic care for our patients and their families as well. And the other thing, final thing I wanted to say is that, and you did mention this in towards the end of your talk, so the value to patients and their families is very evident. I think what is probably less evident, but you helpfully really did make that point, is a value to the staff as well. I think the education, the support that the A&E team have felt from this has been really important as well, because they've had a tough time, and this I think has really helped them. So well done to you, well done to Claire, and to everybody involved. I think it's a great project, and something you should all be really proud of.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Ray. And how pleasing for the board to know how much the Chief Medical Officer supports the work being done here. So great stuff. Thank you, Ray. Karen, good morning. Shall I bring you in, please?
Thanks, Max. Yeah, fantastic. Really, really great to hear about the work you're doing. I chair the West Yorkshire Cancer Alliance Patient Experience Strategy and Improvement Group, and we met last Friday and went through the Cancer Patient Experience Survey because the results are just out. And one of my biggest frustrations is the patient experience, and that end-to-end system-wide working, person-centred approach, and the staff confidence that you spoke about as well. So you know, we recognise, I think, during the session last week, the issues within primary care, and you know, that's often where some of this starts. I just wondered whether or not you'd be up for coming and presenting the same to the patient experience group, because I just think there's a lot of learning in what you're doing, and it would do the West Yorkshire Cancer Alliance good to hear some of what you're about.
Yeah, of course, gladly, Karen. And I think we're very much within Bradford building links with the acute oncology service. So we do a lot of joint reviews, both looking at after patients' symptoms alongside their active anti-cancer treatments. So I think those links will probably be strengthened over the next year. But yeah, be very, very happy to come and present.
Brilliant. I mean, the outcome, the Cancer Alliance objective is really around making the patient experience outcome the same as clinical outcomes as well, and treating them with equal urgency and seriousness. So yeah, it'd be great if you could come along. I'll be in touch and I'll let you know when the next one is. I think it's probably December.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Karen. That's a great link to make. And Lucy, you were not obliged to answer right away, of course, but I'm delighted you will offer to speak to the group. So thank you very much. Yeah. Paul, good morning, and the floor's with you.
Thanks, Max. Thanks, Lucy. And again, thank you very much for all of the work. There's a range of us who've had close personal experience of the criticality of this work in terms of our own family and personal lives. Having declared my interest explicitly at the start and not wanting to confuse matters, because clearly charities have their own objectives, and largely Yorkshire Cancer Research is in the prevention, diagnosis, treatments end of the spectrum. We are certainly pivoting to respond to the challenges of inequalities differently. I mean, it's not been a charity that's necessarily identified and recognised that, and a number of us who've joined working in different populations have tried to press that point going forward. So I guess I'm just opening up a channel potentially of the 2023 calls closed, but when the 2024 call is being framed, I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you about the legitimacy of the next steps in this work potentially being something that's within scope for Yorkshire Cancer Research funding, because if we segment it too much, then we completely cut across our intentions and our ambitions to look after patients in all stages of the management of their lives and the course of disease. So it was just an offer really, is to have a catch up as to whether we can inform and influence that next call appropriately.
That's perfect, Paul. Thank you very
Thanks,
much. And
Paul.
indeed, I'd made a note, Paul, to ask whether, with your perspective, was there anything you wanted to add? And you've done that perfectly. Thank you. And good morning, Karen. Shall I give the floor to you? Thanks.
Morning. I've put something in chat as well, but I was just thinking then, so palliative care is one of the areas that has a nominated non-executive director lead, and it's Mohammed, and he's not here today. So I think we need to commit to our next, we meet on a quarterly basis, myself, Mohammed, with the palliative care team. So I think we'll commit to going through this with Mohammed as well. But also I wonder if through that meeting we can look at how we would want to further spread this or continue this beyond the pilot, how we take this forwards, because I think Mohammed's help on that would be useful. And there seem to be other people that are interested in this as well. So Paul Rice, from an IT point of view, I'm sure your expertise would be welcome as well. So I think it's an offer that at our standard quarterly catch-up around palliative care, Lucy, that involves Mohammed, that we just have a little bit more in-depth look at this to see how we can support going forwards and make it even better and brighter and shinier, because it really is excellent what you've achieved. And I think it's exceeded all of our expectations from when that business case first came to execs. And I've just checked back, it was September 21 when it came to execs for the first time. So, you know, there's a lot been achieved. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Sorry, just to come in there, Max. I think there are a lot of opportunities from a research point of view and a service development point of view. We've got an awful lot of data that I think we could share if we had the time to really get to grips with it. So any support with that would be very welcome.
Karen, I'll pick up on your point about Mohammed and just make some personal contact with him, reminding him of the importance of today's presentation, and that it was very well received at board, and we're looking at ways in which we can develop and support and enhance it, as you said, shinier and brighter perhaps even, yeah. So great stuff, Karen. Thank you. Thank you, Lucy. Okay, shall I just, Lucy, that I can see that there's also a comment of support, not for discussion now necessarily, helpfully, one of our non-exec directors, Sugra, is online with us and has just talked about the potential there for engaging more strongly with the Muslim community, and she's got thoughts about that, so she'd be happy to follow up offline, sorry, should that be required. So I'm sure that'll be well received, and there'll be ways in which we can make sure that there's contact between us. You know that Sarge leads executive director wise, etc., and indeed Lucy's offering to be in touch with you, so we can make sure that happens. And Laura, in that spirit, it might be that you help Lucy with Sugra's email address or something like that. Laura, could I turn to you regarding the point that Mel made about the Equality Diversity Council work that links or could link very well with Lucy's work, and perhaps just make sure you and Mel decide the best way to do it, but as long as Lucy's briefed on what that's about. We wouldn't expect Lucy to have to sit now for 4 hours and wait for the Equality Diversity Council update. So if we could just capture that request, please, that Lucy's briefed on what that one's about. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. I appreciate that. Thanks. Yeah. Well, that's great. That as often is the case, of course, when we learn about the work of CSUs, it goes down extremely well. I said it before, I know executive directors will have a greater day-to-day experience of these things, but it's a matter for the whole board. And Lucy, what you've done there is you have increased our learning and understanding of the work you do there, and you will improve our decision-making as a board. Because I know for a fact now I can look at non-exec colleagues who chair the academies, committees in this organisation, and we'll be thinking now about REACT and the work that we've learned from that when they're making decisions or steering discussions appropriately. So you have had an influence on us, and that's very much the purpose of it. We want to learn from you and be a better organisation for it. Lucy, was there anything you wanted to say as a final word?
just an acknowledgement that this has only been successful due to the brains of Sarah Holmes and Claire Raymond. I took on the post when everything had been up and running and all the thought and dedication and time had been put in already. So yeah, just a recognition of their input and dedication to making the service happen, and the rest of the team really, and ED colleagues.
Thank you. Well, let's record that in the minutes of this board meeting and unanimously endorse that sentiment as directors. So well said, Lucy. Brilliant start to the meeting, Lucy. Great update, great learning from us. Thank you so much for coming to us, and clearly you'd already impressed the execs. Well, you've impressed the full board, I can assure you. That's great. Thank you for what you do, Lucy. Have a good day.
Thanks ever so much. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Yeah, well done, colleagues. I thought that was great, and I really did mean it when I said it was as good as an example I've seen of putting patients in control. And that's, you know, it's an easily forgotten mantra sometimes, isn't it? But so important. So great stuff. And I know it will influence our thinking, etc. Okay. A pause, a moment, a breath, and into business from the previous board meeting. So we have our minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of July. Excuse me. And Karen, sorry, I missed your chat comment there that you are the executive lead for palliative care. Thank you. Thank you. I think I'd gone to Sarge because he'd introduced it. So that's noted. Thanks. Yeah. Colleagues, the minutes of the July board meeting, again, obviously done in detail, taken care over. We all get the chance to see them before they're produced, but are there any matters of inaccuracy or amendment that you would wish me to note, please? May we take them as a true record of the July meeting? It would appear so. Thank you, everybody. And in terms of matters arising, then obviously we've got the sheet with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 actions on there. So a quick note of those. We've got the SARS to share the data regarding schemes designed to prevent unnecessary admissions. Are we all happy that that's been done? It's shown as complete, but it's only right that gives people the time to say, hang on, I didn't get that, or can I ask a question about it? Okay, so I'll assume that there's nothing to say there. There's the patient story regarding communication with patients, and we're just hoping to improve that. A slightly, well, Laura, the action sits with you, and I know it's Karen that has brought it to our attention. Obviously, it's an area we're trying to work hard on. I know we have got some difficulties with patient experience scores. Whether they truly reflect everything we're doing is another question, I know, and I won't get into the deep debate that could follow. But Laura or Karen, is there anything you'd want to say in relation to progress with that particular work? This was a briefing session for governors and non-exec directors. Have we managed to get anywhere with the date?
I think Max probably needs to sit down with you and agree where we pencil this into the governor's work plan, just to make sure that can happen.
That's absolutely fine. Yeah. No, that's fine, Laura. As I say, it's not a test, but I don't want to rush past it without making sure there's anything to say. We have our health inequalities and waiting list analysis. I do want to personally commend this. I was delighted that Karen, as chief nurse, picked up on this and saw the opportunity to expand this sort of analysis into other areas of our work. Delighted to hear that. We're going to talk about it as a board in board development, and that's on its way. And I recognise that we've got a good item today, item 9 as well. Can I assume that we're still underway with that? And as a board, we'll look at building on that and seeking to work from our analysis and understand those potential inequalities that arise.
Yeah, sorry, Max. It's just to say, I think this one as well, we need to probably look at the board development planner and work out where this one fits in best. Because I think in October we've got the PSAFE training, so yeah, possibly December or after that.
Good for you, Laura. You're pointing at me there. Max, we need to sit you down and work out what dates we can get these in. So I agree. Thank you. That's no problem at all. Our 4th of the 6 is shown as complete, the People Academy. This was the disciplinary issues, and I know this is a sensitive area, but we, as we should, we're just looking at ethnicity, weren't we, and the various proportions of colleagues from a minority ethnic background who may be subject to disciplinary complaints. Fahim, I know you were going to talk to at least one neighbouring trust and maybe more in respect of whether it's a disproportionate difference amongst trusts. I know you won't want to give detail that might, well, you won't give detail that might identify people, but it was just about whether, was there anything from your discussions there that you wish to share with director colleagues at Open Board? Fahim,
So Max,
anything to say? Yeah.
Yes, so this was, I think, a question raised by one of our NED colleagues around some data that had been published on Twitter that was showing that one of our neighbouring trusts, rather than disciplinary, I think it was more around GMC referrals for medical staff. And that one of the neighbouring trusts was standing out as being particularly high in terms of their referral rates. I did actually have a conversation with my counterpart at that trust, and we had what transpired is that actually their data that was entered was incorrect. So they weren't in fact an outlier, but the data published meant that they did stand out. So they were looking into how where the error occurred and how that data was given when actually it wasn't an accurate picture of their referral rates. So I have had that conversation. There isn't any learning for us necessarily to take from that. So that's complete from trying to gauge whether there's any learning that we need to take from it.
Fahim, that's very helpful. Is your message to directors that there perhaps appears to be no significant differences? It was perhaps a data issue. Is that fair?
Yes, certainly. So that's the feedback I've had from my colleague at that trust in terms of actually when they have, so the concerns that were raised here around actually it appears we've got a neighbouring trust who are a complete outlier. Is there something in terms of sort of learning that we can share either way, etc. I had that discussion. Their data entered was incorrect, so it seems to be a data issue for them. We don't appear to have a neighbouring peer trust who are a complete outlier when it comes to referrals of staff, especially in terms of ethnic minority staff having a significantly higher proportion of GMC referrals.
Yeah.
Although we know nationally the picture is that to registering bodies, ethnic minority staff do have higher referral rates.
Yes. Well, can I suggest, colleagues, it's commendable that Fahim's undertaken those inquiries. I'm delighted it was raised and discussed and properly looked at, and we remain vigilant to it, don't we? It's okay to say in Open Board, of course, that in Closed Board we do receive a report on disciplinary processes, staff suspension reports and regulatory body referrals, and we do indeed address those by ethnicity as well as other themes that arise. So I commend you for that, Fahim, and for the inquiries you've made. And we note that there perhaps appears to be no obvious differences. It may have been a data issue. So thank you for that. The 5th of 6 is the Board Assurance Framework word, high-level risks. And this was refreshing and rewording risk 3676, which was lone worker devices. That's shown as being complete and updated. Karen, was there something about that? Thank you.
Yes, so it was updated and completed, but just in the last 2 weeks, a risk has been raised again in relation to maternity and lone worker devices that is triggered onto the high-level risk. That's risk number 3767. We reviewed these at execs this Monday, so I've actually got a meeting after board actually with key people to just review that and see what's happened. It looks like there's been some hiccups in the rollout or the procurement of some of the devices. Right. So it was resolved at the time of printing, if that makes sense, or at the time of update, but there's concerns been raised in the last 2 weeks. So we've reopened the risk, but by the time it does the academy cycle, which will be next week, we'll have a better update on that.
Thank you very much, Karen. That's really useful detail, and I'm glad you're on that. So much appreciated for the additional detail. Thanks. And finally, the looking after our people point, which was the analysis in relation to our own Core 20 cohort. Fahim, again, shall I just turn to you and ask whether there's any progress to report, please, on that?
So, in terms of actually the staff survey data and analysis around the Core 20, we have looked at this, Max. It is really difficult because the staff survey doesn't capture any background data from a staff perspective. It is very much focused on a staff list and all of that sort of process takes place anonymously by an external provider. So what we don't have is a central list of who has completed a staff survey, who hasn't, and the nature of staff survey is such that we shouldn't have that data either, because we want it to be an opportunity for staff to be able to have a say and freely be able to give their views without any sort of fear of any concerns or fear around giving that feedback and the organisation potentially knowing who they are, etc. So it's completely anonymised.
Right.
And that makes it really difficult for us to really delve into any further data without it then becoming difficult for us to keep the anonymous nature of that. So I'm not sure that we can, from a staff survey perspective, drill down into the level of detail that we discussed, simply because it protect the details that we collect, protect the identity of individuals carrying out the survey, and that's really important to us in terms of staff being able to have that assurance that it is an anonymous survey that they are taking part in.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you, Fahim. I know that it was a suggestion at the last board meeting. It was about my desire that, and I think shared by some directors, that we might wish to understand how many of our 6,000 people perhaps are within the Core 20 cohort. So, nature of deprivation, etc. We're probably vigilant to it in other ways. I accept that. Karen Walker, may I just turn to you as chair of our People Academy? We don't need to spend a long time on this, and it was my proposal was in the context of some good work here in understanding our staff. Do you think the People Academy can remain as vigilant as possible, Karen, to those members of staff who perhaps have deprivation and perhaps some of the key clinical areas that are in Core 20? I'll take your view.
Yeah, definitely, Max. I think it's something we can do, but we'd need to do it really discreetly. So whilst we could use People Academy as a vehicle, I don't think it's something we can talk openly about there necessarily, because I think people may be embarrassed if we started talking that way. But I do think we can do some digging and take some assurance in the background and use that academy as the vehicle for doing that.
Thank you. That's fine, Karen. And so, Fahim, I do also note, of course, the notes in the actions, which talks about whether there might be opportunity for more detail when we renew the contract regarding staff survey. So, listen, I realise this could take up half a day in discussion. I know that we want to understand our staff the best we possibly can. I hear from Karen there can be a vigilance within People Academy work. So Fahim, unless there's anything else you want to say, I'm going to propose that we can close this action and note it as directors as an important feature. Is that fair? Yeah, okay, that's great. So I'm happy that we'll pick up on that, and I do note the potential for working with the contract provider. Thank you, everybody. Okay. Shall we move then to business reports? Are we okay? We've dealt with matters arising properly. We have the report from the chairman. At the risk of making this about me, shall I say, people comfortable? It's a briefing paper, of course. There's a lot there about our colleagues and those that had renewed contracts with us, which is great. I have, of course, attended the local West Yorkshire and Bradford Partnership meetings and contributed there. Don't think there's anything particularly to report at board. I would always bring to your attention immediately things that are on my mind. So may I ask that my report is taken as read? Comfortable with that? Yeah, okay. Let's move now then to the opportunity for Mel to bring to our attention what she would wish to. Mel, I do know that you have, well, you're on it, aren't you? You know about the Lucy Letby case and RAC concrete, etc. Partnerships is there as well. So I'll turn to you. I know that you're going to bring us up to date with those matters that you consider directors should be well briefed on. So Mel, with you.
Thanks, Chair. So I'll just, I mean, I largely will take the report as read, but this is always as an opportunity just to enhance it a little bit with anything that has happened since the report was written. Clearly, it begins with the operational impact of industrial action, of which has been, pretty consistent now for a very large period of time. We'll be approaching shortly a year of intermittent industrial action that has intensified over more recent months. And indeed, today we are in a 1 day off from a very intense period of striking action by junior doctors and consultants. So what you see there is the schedule of strikes that the period that we're currently in, and the impact that has had previously is articulated. But just to bring you up to date on the impact of the strikes between the 19th of September and the 23rd of September, because I know it's really important that, as well as the operational impacts day to day on our ability to run urgent and emergency services, we must not forget the impact on individual patients. Every cancellation has a far-reaching consequence for the patient who is waiting and should have had that test, that operation, that procedure, or that consultation. So I just want to be, we cannot get complacent just because more and more strikes are happening. So to emphasise that point, we have cancelled in this more recent period 274 new outpatients appointments, 604 follow-up appointments. For cancer patients, we've cancelled 16 new patient appointments. We have managed to prioritise going ahead with 376 of those. And in follow-ups, we've cancelled 100. So there's about a 19% reduction in our normal follow-up for cancer patients in an outpatient setting. On our elective procedures, we've cancelled 18 out of 37, which is 49% cancellation rate. And on day cases and inpatients, this is where it's had the biggest impact, because this is a much more complex set of relationships between multiple specialties. We've cancelled 86 from 106 that were booked to take place, which is an 81% cancellation rate. So I think that's really important to understand that. Turning to page 3, you will see really good news. We had the groundbreaking ceremony of our St Luke's Hospital development for the surgical day case unit, and construction is really picked up pace. It's a modular build, so you may have seen on social media some images shared that speak to that going up at a rate of knots. And it was a great event to be able to do the groundbreaking, surrounded by the clinical teams who are going to be intimately involved in the construction of that, from a point of view of making sure that it is designed to meet the operational needs of our clinical teams. Turning to the Lucy Letby situation, no one can fail to be utterly shocked and appalled by the actions of Lucy Letby. Our thoughts as an organisation and indeed across the whole of the NHS, so very much with the families affected. But inevitably, and quite rightly, our attention turns to the question of, could something similar happen in this organisation? And I know the chairman hasn't talked about it, but I know it's included in his report, the strengthening of procedures around the fit and proper person, aspect of our governance arrangements around checking our appointments of our exec team and senior appointments and board appointments. And it's also the case that we have received the letter that's appended in my report, asking the trust to check its freedom to speak up and its whistleblowing arrangements. And I had the pleasure of sitting with Karen Walker as Ned lead for our Freedom to Speak Up function in our quarterly report more recently, just in the last couple of weeks, with Karen Dauber and Sue Franklin, our Freedom to Speak Up guardian, where we did talk about this. And whilst we are comfortable that we have some very good arrangements, board colleagues will remember the deep dive that we did in the board development session that we did with the National Freedom to Speak Up team. Again, it's not an area clearly that any of us can ever be complacent with. So we will continue to monitor and to strengthen those arrangements in line with the requirements of the letter that you see appended. I'll turn now, if I may, to the section on partner projects making staff HSJ awards. Just to let you know that unfortunately our Spark team, who were shortlisted for the Ramadan Allies project, weren't successful in winning that. It was great that they were shortlisted. It was highly competitive. The team did go to the award ceremony, but disappointed not to win that. But all credit to them for the work they've done on the Ramadan Allies, and indeed all the work that they do as a Spark team, because they are a real asset to the organisation. But some good news that's not captured here is that in the HPMA Awards, which is the industry awards for professionals working in HR and OD, our OD team won National Team of the Year just a couple of days ago. And we talk about in this report, I talk about the Thrive offer, because we're just going to approach the sort of latest wellbeing campaign commencing on the 25th of September. And it in part is because of our Thrive approach to supporting our people and all our work in the space of developing our leaders under that umbrella brand of Thrive that has been recognised nationally, and that is really fantastic. So well done to that team and anybody associated with it. Chairman has alluded to the RAC situation. Of course, that came to a head by virtue of the impact on schools, not hospitals, although it's very familiar territory in the NHS to understand that there are a number of hospitals, notably in our place, Airedale, affected by this failure of the autoclaved concrete. And indeed, Airedale have attracted funding through the New Hospitals project to remedy that, and we as a place will be supporting them in that work. We have been again required to check our own estate, and in that regard you will see the checks and balances that we can offer some assurance that we are not affected by RAC. The only outstanding area that we await the report on is Skipton Hospital, which it doesn't belong to us, but out of which we run our satellite renal unit. So we need to be assured that that accommodation is safe. So we'll be helping with that survey, and depending on the outcome of that, we will we'll inform the board and we'll take any necessary action that we have to. Just want to highlight one other area, and with apologies for bringing this late and tabling it as part of my report, and I'm going to ask Karen to speak on it. People will be aware perhaps of widespread coverage nationally through media, social media and other outlets the disturbing findings of a British Journal of Surgery survey into the experiences of women working in surgery, principally surgical trainees and surgeons who are female. In that, a third of those female surgeons and trainees working in the NHS have reported that they have experienced within the past 5 years some form of sexual assault, be that unwanted physical advances, verbal abuse, sexual banter, and in some cases rape. Now that is a really, really shocking finding, and I thought it was an ideal opportunity for us to expedite some work that we were already planning to do. Indeed, it was planned to come to exec team next week. But as we got aboard, and as it requires, I think, board sign up, I want to bring the sexual charter to the attention of the board with a request that we sign up to support the sexual safety charter. And I thought, rather than wait for the next board, if you would indulge me, please, we would seek to do that, because I think we really need to be seen for the benefit of all the women working in surgery here at BTHFT, and not just surgery, it has to be said, to be supporting women and displaying our zero tolerance to any behaviour, the like of which has been called out in that survey. So if I may ask Karen just to talk us through that, Chair.
Thank you, Mel. Of course, yes, and the papers have been circulated too, so thank you for that. Karen, with you.
Thank you, and again, apologies for the late circulation of the paper, but it felt too big an opportunity to pass up on, really, and we didn't want to delay with this. So this is really important work. So earlier this month, the 4th of September, NHS England announced and provided trusts with the 10-step guide and charter around eradicating sexual harassment and sexual violence. And that's really important. The 10 steps are quite clearly defined, and they talk through the actions that trusts should take if they are signing up to this charter. So we're probably all sat here thinking, well, that's an absolute no-brainer and it's the right thing to do, and I'm sure that, and I believe it is, and I believe we should sign up to it. But just before we do that, I think we just need to be aware of what we've already got and the processes we'll need to take this forward. So within the safeguarding team and within teams in HR, we do support staff that are subject to sexual violence and domestic abuse as well. And we routinely ask about domestic abuse when members of staff return to work after long periods of absence. And we also have within Sarah Turner's safeguarding team something called an IDVA, which is an independent domestic violence advocate. And we're currently training to have I think it's an IDSPA, which will be a sexual violence advocate as well. And those posts are really crucial for our staff to access, to find a safe place to stay. And there are many of examples, not for this open forum, where we do support staff that are facing extremely difficult circumstances at home. So the proposal is that I would be the exec lead for this piece of work. So even though it isn't safeguarding per se, because the definition of adults who should be safeguarded is very clearly defined in law, and it is highly likely that people suffering domestic violence or sexual violence may not be classed as a vulnerable adult under the law. But safeguarding is the right place, it is the best fit for this. But we also need to make sure we coordinate our efforts. So occupational health and also HR will be really important in how we take this forward. So I'm going to lead this piece of work. I'm going to pull together a task finish group. We do have some existing policies in relation to domestic violence. I think they're probably 5 or 6, even more years old now. So we will need to review those policies. So the proposal is that we sign up to the charter. I will be the executive lead for this piece of work. We will bring back reports as and when that is felt necessary, but board needs to note that the detail of any work that is undergone would need to be kept very confidential and would not be shared in detail. What we would share on, though, is on the policies that we've set up, that we've developed, and the services that we've developed. It also links, the other point to make is it also links really clearly with freedom to speak up, because people do approach freedom to speak up when they are concerned about things that are really confidential, that might not really have anything to do with work. So whether they've got a difficult home situation, but also freedom to speak up is going to be crucial if staff members are disclosing sexual harassment or assaults within the workplace too. And we will need to train people to receive this information, because it's quite specialised, this, and it can be very, very upsetting. So we will look at how we put additional support in to managers, line managers, people that might be dealing with disclosures as well. So I'll pause there for any questions, but it's very new, very hot off the press, and very necessary, unfortunately.
Of course, and entirely appropriate to bring to our attention. So no, I commend you for doing that early. Karen, just one quick question from me would be, with our present recording systems, are we able to identify the case volumes that we have of sexual misconduct or sexual violence reports? So I'm not asking you to reveal those, of course, but are you able to turn to a system and say, I can tell you how many we've had over a certain period?
I don't know. I think that the answer will be that we don't routinely record that, and it will be on an ad hoc basis, but Fahim's here as well. Yeah. So, but we will sort out the reporting as we go through the task finish.
Of course. Of course. No, I appreciate that, Karen. Yeah, thank you. Fahim, did you have a view on that, please? Case volumes.
Yes, so Max, we do record all issues that are reported and investigated. So we would be able to get that data. We may not have a system that can pull off a report, but it might be more of a manual sort of troll through the case records that we've got, but we certainly have that data and information. And whilst this charter will commit us to making sure that this is a really focused approach on sexual safety at work, I just want to highlight that actually we do get cases where individuals highlight issues or matters where they have been subject to either sexual harassment or unwanted conduct. So those are investigated fully and appropriate steps are taken already. This is really going, sort of enhancing what we already do and making a really clear stand around sexual safety and giving some clarity and a commitment. So just want to assure the board that actually we do, when we do get matters such as this raised, they are fully investigated and treated seriously. We already have processes in place. This is enhancing what we've already got.
That's very helpful, Fahim. Thank you. If I could just put down on record, Karen, I think you're in the same place as me, but I think directors would want to understand the volume of cases and an idea of outcomes. So I'm sure that'll come, Karen, yeah?
I think so, and Fahim makes a good point. So where somebody formally raises a concern, those are absolutely investigated and recorded. I think there will be other maybe informal discussions that are had that aren't always recorded. There will be members of staff that just feel that they cannot disclose something. So, you know, we won't be aware of that volume either. What the charter does, if we get it right, is gives permission to people to come forward, but also sets out clear guidance for people and for managers as to what's acceptable or not. Now, some of that will still be subjective. So when you look under what's described as sexual harassment, you know, I think at one point it describes how somebody would look at somebody. Now, I get that that can be subjective, but at least it now opens up the conversation to have that conversation for people to say, I don't feel it's appropriate when you smile and wink at me when I come in the morning. I'm not trivializing anything at all, but I think people will have different, the way people come across will impact on different people differently, and depending on their own personal experience, that impact will be different. I think what this attempts to do is just to make things a little bit more objective, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, thank you, thanks. So directors, should we adopt the 10 principles? Should we support Karen's leadership in this area? And do we agree that we want to have an idea of case volumes and outcomes appropriately recorded and assessed? I'll bring in thoughts and comments, but that's the ask, I think, of this particular paper. So Karen, please do come in.
Thanks, Max. And I'd like to just come back to Mel's report as well at the end, if you don't mind.
Yes.
So yeah, absolutely. I fully support this. And I do think it's right that Karen's the lead, because there's a really close link with freedom to speak up. So I think that really works. I'm slightly concerned about reporting volumes and outcomes. I think we've got to find a way of getting assurance. But I would hate if there's a handful of cases that anyone would think that, aside from us needing to seek reassurance that people can speak up and that we will follow up and act on that feedback, I'm just very nervous about putting people off because the numbers and volumes and outcomes do get recorded and reported. So it's right we record for definite. I just think we need to find a way, maybe it is through freedom to speak up meetings, Max, that we get that reassurance, but not in an open board.
No, thank you, Karen. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. We will defer to Karen's leading the team on this. Yeah, so okay. Just to say, Karen, I would agree with your point there. Honestly, I have no idea how many cases of sexual misconduct and violence we've had in the past 12 months, for example, and I ought to know that in some way, but you're right, so there may be a more closed method of directors understanding that. Julie, please do come in.
So sorry, I have questions on Mel's report. Absolutely support this. Recognise what Karen says and agree with that, but my questions are on Mel's, so do you want to come back to that, Max?
I'll do that if you don't mind, Julie, because I'll make sure that we're all on one page with this important piece. Yeah, thank you, Julie, thank you. Fahim, please.
So just in terms of actually reporting, just for board's assurance, we do report all disciplinary and conduct matters formally to the board as part of the private board session. And whilst that doesn't include any of the finer details in terms of the nature of those allegations, the board does have an overview of types of misconduct matters that we are working through and sort of investigating. So whilst I accept that's all the formal investigations and disciplinary processes, the board, I hope, feel that you have oversight of those matters.
Thank you, Fahim. That could be a good model. I would agree. I can see the sense in how public we might not wish to necessarily make this, but directors need to understand the volume. So thank you. I appreciate that, Fahim. So shall I come back to Julie? And I think, Karen, you had a point on Mel's report as well. But before I do that, may I ask do we all unanimously support these the adoption of these 10 principles? We note that it's under the safeguarding team, and we support Karen's executive lead on this work. I'm going to take it that that's unanimous support for that. Karen, was there something else you wanted to comment on that, please?
I was going to suggest, Max, if I bring something back to board development, maybe in about 6 months' time, because I think it will be really useful to sort of look at the findings that are emerging both locally and nationally, but also how we explore and how we describe what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. It might be useful for us to be aware of that as a board as well, for our own awareness.
Dead right. I think that's entirely right, Karen. And Karen, is that in the context of there'll be lots of things you're cracking on with in the 6 months that you're putting in place?
So I think there's two things. I think one, it's for our own awareness of what this actually means and to test out our own thinking around what the definitions of, sexual harassment is, because I think that's crucial, because we've already said it can be quite subjective, but also to give an update on the work that's been done and where we're up to as a trust. I think a more informal session might be useful.
Ideal. Thank you very much, Karen. Yeah, and Karen, if you do set up a little bit of a project group or something, I'm sure you'll perhaps look at non-executive input if you feel that's appropriate at some time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll leave that with you as to who the best people around the table are, but that's absolutely fine. Thank you. Okay, so we'll record that as unanimous support for the paper at Appendix 4, and that's the point. We're going to adopt the principles. We support the fact it's through the safeguarding team, and we commend Karen's lead, and we support Karen, and Karen has offered to make sure that within the next 6 months or so, there'll be a feedback to board development as to progress, and maybe even, of course, asking for approval for perhaps new policies or things in place. Certainly reporting mechanisms. Pleased to hear that there will be strong recording mechanisms. Mel, thank you for raising that in the first place, and we commend Karen's support for that. Let's pick up on Mel's report if there's anything arising. Mel, may I assume that you had you completed in terms of delivering your report?
Yes, thanks. Yeah. Happy for any questions, Chair.
Great stuff. Yeah, so I'll go to Julie first and then to Karen. Thanks, Julie.
Okay, so 2 things from me, Mel. I know the RAC, and I know we haven't got any risk from RAC directly as our site, apart from the Skipton one, which we are looking at. I suppose I'm interested in the risk at place and how that might impact on us as a trust. Do we think there's any risk from us from that? Because I know there is RAC in Airedale and at the Care Trust. And if we do think there is any risk, what are we doing to mitigate it? Do you want me to answer that, and then I'll do my second question?
Yeah, happy to answer that. Thank you, Julie. So colleagues may be aware, those that sit on the partnership board, that as a place we have as our top risk actually the impact of RAC on Airedale Hospital. There are 2 key impacts I would suggest. One is we needed to secure the investment through the New Hospitals programme to carry out the rebuild of RAC to eradicate the problem. In the shorter term, there is a continual requirement of capital investment to carry out the mitigations against the overarching risk that RAC represents. So aside from the desire to rebuild Airedale Hospital, there is a requirement until that can be done that there is capital investment to carry out works to mitigate the risks. So that's works to install props where some of the panels have been found to be more fragile than others, and to ensure that in carrying out that work, there is appropriate decant facilities so that the work can be carried out appropriately. So that might mean closing a clinical service down, moving it to a temporary relocation, doing the prop work, and then moving the services back in if that's appropriate to do so. That's one element of it. The second element that we are fully engaged in, not just across Bradford District and Craven, but across the whole of West Yorkshire, is what would happen if there was a failure of any part of that building that impacted on clinical services, such that there needed to be an urgent evacuation of that particular part or whole of the building, and how would we respond to that in ensuring that we were able to provide those clinical services on an ongoing basis to the people of Bradford District and Craven. Now, not every patient who uses Airedale Hospital comes from Bradford District and Craven. There are, there is a boundary with North Yorkshire and indeed Lancashire. And so that work doesn't just affect us. There are conversations as part of the mitigation plan that involve other hospitals like East Lancashire or Harrogate Hospital, or in the impacts towards York Hospital potentially. NHS England oversee the contingency planning of what would happen and what we would all do in the event of the failure of any or some or all RAC panels simultaneously at Airedale Hospital. And for our part, SAJ, as part of the Chief Operating Officer group at West Yorkshire under the leadership of Wyatt, is involved in those conversations too. So correspondingly, you will see in other places RAC mentioned because of the consequences of having to respond. So if for example, Airedale wasn't able to take emergency admissions on one day, then those patients may have to go to East Lancashire, some to Bradford, some to Huddersfield, and so on and so forth. There is a plan around that, Julie, and we are part of it.
Okay, thank you. I'm particularly interested in what it might impact on us as a trust in kind of this arena. So thank you, that's helpful. I suppose my second question is about the strike. Appreciate all the hard work that's going on, and I know we're doing lots to mitigate any impact. It's really good to understand the kind of numbers that are being cancelled, and we can kind of quantify that. In the press, we've seen the thing about critical incidents, the 22 critical incidents. I suppose, are we confident, and it might not be a question for you, Mel, it might be for Ray and Saj, do we think it's able to kind of say if we've got any critical incidents that are attributable to the strike? And if we did have, would we be reporting them?
Thanks. Well, I will bring colleagues in, but the answer to that is yes. But I'll let them explain why I'm confident that we are tracking and have tracked since the December last year when this all started, what sort of impact it's having in relation to the safety of the patients in this organisation. What we can't track necessarily, I'm sure colleagues will do, is the longer term impact of some of the delays and the cancellations, as that confers a greater waiting time for some patients. Now that is a quality impact, a quality of life impact, doubtless. Whether or not it's a patient safety and has ultimately an impact on the eventual mortality, morbidity of that patient may remain to be seen in the longer term. But I'll defer to Ray in the first instance, then Saj.
Thank you, Mel. Yeah, Ray, do come in, please.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mel. So yes, absolutely agree. And Mel's absolutely right. And I think we're confident for several reasons, really, that we haven't had any incidents as a direct result of the strike action on any of the strike days. And I think the first reason is that the planning that has gone into this is absolutely intense. It happens starting from weeks before the strike happens and intensifies as we get closer to the strike days. So we're obviously in a strike period now. The next ones are due at the beginning of October, 2nd, 3rd and 4th of October, I think. And planning for those will start immediately as we've finished for these. And I have to just call out that, the operational management teams have done an unbelievable job, an outstanding job in all these preparations, because it's pretty much a full-time job. So in the preparations, we make sure that we only do work that we're confident we can deliver safely. Particularly yesterday, it was the first day of joint junior and consultant doctor strike action. So we were extremely cautious yesterday. First priority obviously has to be to maintain safety and to do the emergency work, which we have to do on that day. And we did that. So the planning, I think, is meticulous, it's extensive, and it has been very successful. And I think it's allowed us actually in Bradford to probably mitigate some of the impacts of the strike. It's still been absolutely enormous, the impact that we've felt. But I think the operational teams, with the work they've done, have been able to keep that to an absolute minimum, albeit still extensive. I think the second reason we can be confident that we haven't seen any incidents is how we monitor and track those. Every day we have multiple touch points relating to the strike, and any issues that might have arisen or discussed during those meetings. And also, of course, that we have our normal trust safety processes. So, for example, every morning at 8:15, we have a trust-wide safety huddle, which I pretty much always attend, and there's always executive presence on that meeting. And any incidents from the previous 24 hours are brought up and discussed at that meeting. And when we're in a strike period, there's always a specific question around, has there been any patient safety impact caused by industrial action? Of course, safety incidents always happen. It's just a fact of life in a hospital, but we're confident that we've not seen any direct impact on safety as a result of the industrial action. But again, of course, Mel is right. The bigger worry here is that unseen impact that won't become apparent probably for 6 months, 12 months maybe, because of potential delays in treatment. And even then, there will be hidden effects and hidden harm to patients, which, given the passage of time, might be difficult to attribute directly to the strike action. So no direct incidents. We're very confident of that. The planning is meticulous, the tracking is careful, but the longer term impact, of course, will be there.
Thank you, Ray. And Saz, did you want to come in on this as well? Thank you.
I think Mel and Ray have already given a very comprehensive position on that, and I completely concur with everything that's been highlighted. It was just to provide the extra assurance, the fact that we have formal command and control infrastructure in place during a strike action, and what that basically means is that we go into bronze, silver, and gold command. We create an operational response document which is circulated out to all of the operational teams. We have a clinical resource pack as well, which goes out to all of the clinical teams. We map out all of the rotas, so we know who's expected where. So we have that level of oversight in terms of our planning and then our day-to-day operational response to that. And Ray's absolutely spot on when he highlights the amazing work that our teams collectively pull together to undertake to keep us and our patients safe during this period of time. Colleagues like Steve Amos are phenomenal individuals in being able to help pull together that command and control infrastructure. And we have a number of touch point meetings every single day without fail throughout the strike period. In addition to that, what we always do is we undertake a debrief following each strike action, and the purpose of that debrief is always to try and understand if there's any learning out of that, and we capture that just in terms of what would be better if we could do X or Y or Z. I think the risk is, but we're clear on this, so we're cognizant of it, is that as more and more strike action is happening, as it becomes regularized, that people become complacent, and that's the thing that we need to avoid, and therefore it gets the same level of scrutiny, whether it's the 11th strike action or whether it be the 10th, 12th, 13th, 14th or 15th. So just to provide you that extra assurance of the command and control infrastructure that we put into place.
That's very much appreciated, Sash. Thank you. And Karen, your point in the chat's really helpful, and noted thanks regarding Datix recording related to industrial action. But did you want to come in with something else?
Yeah, it's just that, we're all absolutely certain that the mitigation and the way we operate now when industrial action takes place means that there's no harm to patients at that time. And we're certain of that because all the systems and processes are there. We do, though, know that, the quality of our services is safety, it's how effective that is, and it's also the experience of our patients. Yes. We absolutely know that this is impacting on the experience of our patients, whether that's somebody that has their operation cancelled, their outpatients are cancelled, whether they have to wait longer for something. So I think we do need to recognise as a board, we're not giving the best experience to our patients during the strike, and that has a knock-on effect then for other patients, because other patients will be displaced to accommodate displaced patients.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, there's that impact in there. Julie, is that helpful? Did that meet your requirements? Yeah, thank you. And Fahim, did you want to come in on this? Yeah.
Yeah, Max, so I just wanted to, just off the back of Karen's point there, just for the board to be sort of aware of these ongoing impact of this on colleagues who are managing the strikes and actually doing all of the planning, and colleagues who are providing the cover, it is an extremely tiring process, and this has now been going on for a considerable length of time. So we've been facing strike action since the end of last year, in some form or another, and it does have quite a significant impact on individuals' resilience levels and actually ability to get on with some of the tasks that we really want to be doing and they want to be doing in terms of some of our senior leaders. So I think it's probably just as important to acknowledge the impact it has on our workforce.
Thank you, Fane. That's very good context, entirely right. Karen, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you. Just a couple of comments, actually, some reassurance around freedom to speak up in relation to sexual safety and the Letby case. So we do have a really thorough conversation on a quarterly basis. Max, you're part of that as well. And actually, through evidence of what is coming through that channel, gives me reassurance that people do raise really knotty issues that can be personal to them, and obviously there's patient safety issues and other things that come through. So we do see evidence through that, but it is a last resort. And there are other channels, obviously, that people use to report issues. And I just think a quick reminder that, you know, when people do speak up, it's up to all of us to listen up and then follow up. So I think Freedom to Speak Up is a really great channel. And you know, we do a lot of campaigning across the trust and making people aware of that channel, but there are other channels there. But actually, just from some of the cases I've been involved in more recently, you do understand that people do use that channel for very personal and very knotty issues. My second point was just going back to the award, actually, Max, if you don't mind. I was going to raise this in the People Academy updates, but the HPMA is the Healthcare People Management Association, and it's there to celebrate the work of people professionals across the UK. So it's quite a big award. So huge congratulations to Kat and the team. And I'm going to just roll them off really quickly. So Carly, Debbie, Lisa, Bethany, Emma, Will and Sarah, because they've done an incredible amount of work. And they actually won the Team of the Year award, which is really significant because it recognises the amazing achievements of that team. But the reason I want to raise it here is it's brilliant news, but actually congratulations to Mel and to the leadership team, because culture is guided by values and by the tone from the top. So, this is celebrating the achievements in terms of culture, and Mel's been driving that cultural work through Kat and through Fahim and through Kez as well. So from my perspective, it's a whole trust effort. And it's brilliant that Kat and the team have been recognised, but I just wanted to pick up and recognise the work that Mel particularly has driven and the rest of the leadership team, because it is that tone from the top that's really important and that has been recognised through that award.
Thank you, Karen. And Fahim, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, that's just want to add to Karen's point. In my sort of HR career, I've never come across a leadership team that's more focused on making sure that we look after our people. And that very much is driven from Mel and her focus on making sure that we are the best place to work. So absolutely, I think that whilst we've got that award within one of our teams, within the HR director of our OD team's work, I think there's very much to do with the fact that we have had the support at board to be able to do the things that we've done. So a massive thank you to Mel and all of you.
Thank you, Fahim. That's noted. That's great stuff. Thank you. Shall I just, Mel, you were right to bring up the fit and proper person test framework. That was tabled at item 5 under matters arising. And I'll be speaking with Fahim and Laura about the right way to put that in place. I have a lot of responsibilities there, of course, with that. So right to mention that. And can I conclude this matter by thanking Sarge, who reacted quickly to a request from me last week regarding volumes of patient impact related to the industrial action. I had a briefing with governors. I, of course, knew that the issue would come up, and I was a little behind on exactly how many patients had been impacted. Mel included that in her report, of course. Saj was able to give me the numbers on the day, and it wasn't a written report I shared, but I was able to give verbal detail of the sort of volumes of numbers that we were affected by there. So, Saj, I do want to record at board my thanks to you for coming straight back to me and giving me information that was extremely helpful to governors. So, thanks for that. Mel, thank you for your input. That's the report from the Chief Executive. So conscious that there's been a lot of heavy stuff there, which is great. It's been really good. I'm grateful for everybody's very collective contribution, which has been extremely strong. And it's the nature of a board meeting, isn't it? When we get into that first hour and a half, it's often the first things that are being discussed are you know, necessarily prioritised, and we need to get to the key issues. What I'm going to suggest is, of course, we have Carl with us now, and I'm conscious, Carl, you did join us on time, and you'll have been waiting to speak. So may I suggest that we take item 9 now, and then we'll take a short break in order that we come back a bit more refreshed for Julie's update on finance and performance and the other matter in there. So let's just take a breath. Let's, given that Carl's been sitting, waiting patiently to speak to us, and what we'll do is we'll go to item 9, health inequalities, access, experience, and outcomes. And there's a particular focus here on those with a learning disability. Saj, I recognise it's between executive colleagues. You're the first name on the lead list. So shall I turn to you first and ask if we might introduce this? And I think, Carl, if it's okay, we've obviously had the slides. So I guess if we can get to the point of what you want directors to know as succinctly as possible, that might help. But I do not want to minimise the importance of this item, of course. Saj, with you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Max. And of course, the board will recognise that this is a further update on the progress with addressing health inequalities. It does form a fundamental part, in fact, of our EDI Council work, which colleagues will be aware that is led and chaired by Mel as our chief exec, and obviously will form part of our work, both internal and at place level. The board has received a number of updates already on the work that we've been doing, and we've undertaken quite a lot of analysis of our waiting list to get a better in-depth understanding of the areas of focus. And I think in the updates that colleagues will have seen from Carl, you'll understand and recognise those focus areas that we've had, and Carl's going to run through some more of those as a reminder. But importantly, the steps on what we're actually doing about it to make a difference to patients on our waiting list. And therefore, naturally, what we've done, and it's right and proper that this sits with myself, with Karen, with Ray, with Mel's leadership through the EDI Council, is we broaden that out now, not just to look at access, but also to include the outcome and the experience aspect of this. So what I'm going to do before we invite Carl to go run through some of the detail of the presentation is to ask Karen to start with the slide deck. Karen will hand over to Carl. Carl will run through the bulk of this presentation, and then for the last slide, hand back to Karen to run us through just the next steps on that, if that's okay.
Thank you, Saj. Karen, with you.
Karen, over to you.
Thank you. So if we can go to the next slide, please. I think it's really important that we talk around the governance, because this isn't something that is done in isolation. This is something that is done across every bit of our business as a trust. So you'll see the final bullet point there. I've described this inequalities lens. So all that we do and all the questions that we ask, the assurance that we seek, is through this lens of inequalities, and making sure that we do our very best to eradicate if possible or level up. So the Equality and Diversity Council, and we've got a report on from the chair of that, Mel, later on the agenda. really oversees as a trust where EDI stuff comes in, and that includes not just internally focused but external as well. So people like Sahel Abbas has been to present at that. We've had presentations from John Wright, the Bonnie Bradford team. In fact, we've had this presentation just last week at that council. And that's how we integrate our outward focus on health inequalities and EDI with our internal focus as well. If we then look at our academy and our board agendas, I think it's quite well documented in the discussions that we have, whether that be in people, in finance, F&P or quality, that we always talk about inequalities. It's become a language that is commonly used in all of our meetings. And it is something we challenge each other on and challenge each other on openly. And it's good to see coming through our reports that our teams are also asking and challenging those questions as well. If we then go through another layer of the organisation, you'll know that we have exec to CSU meetings. And as part of that, we also regularly challenge on all things, and included in that is how we are addressing health inequalities. So work in maternity around translation and the inequalities that are being seen there is routinely discussed at that level. In A&E, what we're doing around access, how we're looking at people that are attending with neurodisability has been really prevalent at the moment, and lots of discussions around that. And this touches on all areas of our services. We also look at, so I would say that years ago it was lip service that we recorded a flag on somebody's record if they had an LD or other things. But actually our operational responses and our clinical systems are now more aligned. So again, it has become part of what we do all the time, putting additional care plans on, putting flags on people's records. People know to look at those flags and use those flags. There may be times when it doesn't happen all the time, but it is much more embedded than it was. And then the final point is, you know, I've described we look at things through an inequalities lens, but when we have new developments, we also look at that and say, right, how will this impact on our community? One, will it make inequalities worse? You know, secondly, will it improve things? And I think we had the REACT presentation just earlier today that was a great example of where we've looked at something in September 21, and actually we said we were going to help to tackle health inequalities, and we have done, and we're now seeing the benefit of that. So I just thought it was really important to show that this isn't a transactional process where somebody in an office looks at a waiting list and ticks a box for somebody or someone, but there are many layers throughout the organisation where this is commonplace and routine where it's looked at. I'll hand over to Carl now for the bulk of the presentation, but there is some additional clinical detail towards the end when it will come back to me and Ray.
Thank you, Karen. Carl, good morning, welcome.
Thank you. Just to continue off where Karen was speaking there, that in terms of national context, I think it's fair to say that the 22-23 guidance, whilst we had looked at what we could do around access data, we haven't perhaps done as good a job as we perhaps would have wanted to and put some renewed effort into that. So that was guided by our understanding of what was needed, but then a push to do something. It's really good to see this year's guidance, which moved us towards coordinate action. We were already onto this. So we've talked in a number of other forums where what we were really doing, lots of people have been presenting, is trying to get the access agenda where experienced outcomes already work, where clinical colleagues were already thinking, trying to get some of our data aligned to that to have this coordinated action. So I think that coordinated action for us is twofold. It's bringing together the understanding of access, experience and outcomes into what we're doing to reduce health inequalities, but then also working beyond our own boundaries, so working with Actors One and partners around what we can do collectively to some of the things we're seeing. So that's the context. In terms of the data, which is the next slide, I have presented some of this before. We've joined lots of attributes to our patient data so we can start applying the lens. The lens we're applying to a lot is the Core 20 lens, so we're using that Core 20 definition to have a look at our waiting lists and our patient data to see if we can see anything within that we can work towards. We're sharing this with partners now. is reciprocal with Actors 1, also with the Institute for Research. We're going to get better at that because a lot of it's narrative and we need to start sharing our data more, but it's helping in terms of sharing our observations and what we can work on together. We've built that in terms of our internal processes, so weekly access cycles, which is where we look at our waiting list, our profiles, our demand, our capacity, have this lens applied to them. And one of the observations we had from the data was around DNAs. And so if you look at the next slide, which is where we talked previously about how we use this data will drive improvements in the data, that's one of the things we've done. So in the first cut of analysis that I presented last year, we saw some tangible things around DNA rates. We've now built a dashboard so we can track the work we're doing on DNA rates and whether or not it's having an impact. So we come on to the next slide. To really quickly touch on some of the findings, we can see that the likelihood of being on a routine pathway, the higher prevalence of DNA were the things that were driving longer waits for core 20 patients. Less likely to be on cancer pathways. We want to know more about that, which drove us into treatment analysis, which I've got as a later slide. We can see no real difference other than those things in terms of if you're, depending on what you're referred for by priority treatment function, you will likely wait pretty much the same time, with the exception of that DNA period putting a little bit on the wait time. We did then look at some of the clinical prioritizations. Once you're onto an admitted pathway, what happens? And we could see no variation within that data. So that's a positive for us. Coming on to the next slide, when we looked at DNAs and we deep dived into them, we couldn't see a strong correlation between DNA rate and ethnicity. There were some examples at a treatment function level, which we've talked to the specialties about, but we could see a strong correlation between DNA rate and age. And this was repeated for almost all the specialties we looked at. So one of the potential avenues for us to look at was this: if we could reduce DNA rates and we look at younger patients in lower IMD areas, that would have a positive impact on health inequalities by reducing the DNA rates for that population. So we started to look at what we could do in relation to that, shared that with Actors 1 and internal programs. So if I look at some of the next slide, when we looked at the treatment data and we really focused in on the referral priority and treatment function to see what was happening, we could see some of the things in relation to the cancer referrals. So there was this prevalence, likelihood in relation to the non-core 20 population in skin cancer that we could look at. There was some national evidence around likely prevalence that we used. Then we also saw some really interesting stuff around gynae and urology, where there was you were much more likely, you were less likely to be referred, but if you were referred, you were much more likely to be treated as an urgent priority 2 patient. So there's a potential there that this is linking to some of the stuff we already knew around late presentation. And we were talking to colleagues around what that might mean. And we were already, in terms of some of the stuff we'd observed and seen, talking the same from where we place the CDCs, how we do CDC activity. So it fed in nicely to conversations that were already happening around the population. We could also see that for some of the routine referrals, you are much more likely to be referred in, and very much for some of the sort of family-oriented services we have. So we started talking to those services, and some of the DNA work is focusing on that area as a result. So if we go on to the next slide, which I think, so one of the things we brought in immediately was the LD prioritization. And so what we've tracked over the last couple of years is the impact that's been having. We can see for all the markers we were interested in, time to first outpatient and time to treatment, that we have had an impact, particularly for priority 2 patients as we work through the P2 waiting lists. We did do some work this time last year in terms of data to have a look at, are we recording the flags? And there's lots of stuff happened since to try and look at the things we could do in terms of our own knowledge of LD and our ability to record that on the system to support some of the things. But there's way more, it goes way beyond that, just the work we're doing as an organisation. We're going to repeat that bit of analysis to see what difference we've made, but also because we want to do some more work with the Care Trust in relation to the admission reasons to see if we can get some more insight to support some of the work. And the next slide extends on the LD prioritisation, where from that observation that we the data is helpful, lots has happened in terms of, you know, our understanding and rules that have been brought into the organisation to support that ongoing connectivity between observation, what people are seeing, what people are doing, interacting with patients, and the information we have to support some of that and direct some of that. So Next slide is taken some of the DNA work we've done. So with Actors One Support, they talked to some of the community groups and got some additional insight in relation to why families are not attending some of the appointments. So there's some structured interviews there which brought out some themes such as the time of the appointment, the location, other commitments, and things have been brought into services to try and target that in terms of travel support and interpreter availability, the use of doctor-doctor. We also looked at some of the obstetric DNA rates, which is the next slide. So internally, we started trialing the use of text messaging in relation to this as a response to some of the stuff we were seeing. And we can see in the data we're tracking this that there has been an impact in relation to obstetric DNA rates, and this coincides with us doing the work around the text messaging. But if you go to the next slide, that isn't the only thing we were doing. So there were already a number of observations in relation to this patient cohort, clinical observations and work the services were doing. So what's happened naturally here is that work of access has come in and it's caught up with that outcomes and experience work people were already doing to bring that triangulated approach to an area. And it's that triangulated approach that we feel is having that benefit. And there's a lot of things listed that you're probably already aware of in terms of the approaches we've taken. So that's a huge positive in terms of what we've observed across the different areas coming together and making it a difference for a group of patients. I think the next slide might be the next steps for me to hand back to Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah. Karen, if you come in, but I'll pose questions till the end of the presentation.
Thanks. So I think, it's important. We've got a lot of data now, and it's important that we turn that data into information and that we regularly review that. So we've already had a presentation of some of this data at the Quality and Diversity Council. That will be the vehicle to have that high-level executive oversight. And we need to make sure that how we report this, it becomes systematic and part of just what we do. The Actors One work is really good because that allows us to focus across pathways. So, I'm involved in the Children's Actors One, Saj is in the Access Actors One pathways, and that gives us greater reach to work together across health, social care, local authority and the VCS. And I think it gives us opportunities to address health inequalities in a way that we've never done before by having a combined response. Because I was amazed over the last few years working with Actors One, actually what is out there, and traditionally we rely on ourselves to do it when sometimes there's somebody else that can do it. The obstetric example is a really good example where, ops teams have worked with a digital solution to looking at DNAs in quite a traditional sort of text message approach. And then the clinical teams have been looking at PMRT and the results of those. And we've talked about this at board many times. And then bringing that together to see actually how we can address and tackle health inequalities. And it works really well when you've got a triumvirate, and it has to be this way. The doctor, the nurse or the midwife or the clinician, and the operational manager really focused on this together. Other really good examples of this are in children's services. A&E is another really good example too. One of the game changers for learning disability and neurodisability is the Oliver McGowan training that's going to be rolled out over the next 12 months. And that's going to provide a greater awareness to all staff. So there is a minimum requirement that all staff have some online training in how to help and recognise people with LD or ND and how we support those. And then a huge, I think it's about 70% of our staff would then be expected to do further training that includes role play with people with lived experience. So we're in the process of asking people with LD and ND to come forward to be supported to help us deliver training in partnership to talk about their experiences of care, because there's no better way of understanding and somebody's journey than walking in somebody's shoes for a couple of miles and understanding how they see things, and it can be quite eye-opening. So the next step, sorry for the typo on that one, there's a lot of work ongoing. Anyway, I'll hand it back to Ray to see if he wants to add anything to that, and then back to Saj for any more conclusions. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. Ray and Saj, if there's anything you'd wish to add, that's fine, but I think we're well briefed on the content there.
Yeah, I won't add too much more, but I sit on the Healthy Minds board, which is a place-based group, and we met just earlier this week, and we agreed across place of that group to accept or adopt the Oliver McGowan training, which is refreshed every 3 years and is a very intensive training package, actually. So as Karen said, probably 70% of our staff will need to adopt tier 2 training, and the rest will be tier 1 training. But even tier 1 training is pretty much half a day's training, so it's going to be really extensive and comprehensive. So that we're going to have to get on with that as well, because it's a 3-year implementation plan, and to get through, you know, more than 6,500 staff is a big ask. Thank you. A hugely impactful story as well. Okay, and Saj, may I assume that there's nothing further to?
Nothing further to add, Chair. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Saj. Carl, we're going to take comments and questions, of course, but I, as chairman, just want to thank you for the work you're doing here. This is great stuff, hugely important and needed, and I'm delighted to see the progress that's being made. Some terrific examples of recognising and rewarding positive outcomes through change in the way that we analyse and understand our patients. So terrific stuff, Carl. It's hugely supported by directors. I'll bring in questions and points. We'll just see if anybody's going to challenge now, of course, and we'll see what's there. John, would you like to come in first?
Thank you, Max. Yeah, I'm really encouraged and heartened by this work, and I'm really tempted to start to repeat some of the stuff that Saj, Karen and Carl said, but I'm not going to do that because it's not a healthy way to run meetings. But I really do fully endorse all of what they've said, and I'm really, really encouraged by it. Ray, I really want to be part of that Healthy Minds group. It's just what I need, mate, is a healthy mind. So if you can get me on that group, I'd really appreciate it. But more seriously, I've made this point generally in the past, but I think it's worthy of note now, and I just want to mention a couple of specifics, if I may, Max. You know, in the interest of balance, really, I know there are some concerns about the activity around health inequalities in Bradford, but what I want to acknowledge is the balance here, really. This is a massive agenda for us in Bradford, given the community we've got, and I think we're doing loads of really positive work in this area, and we're moving in the right way. And a couple of things I want to just specifically mention. You didn't use these words, Karen, but I think the organic way that staff are now confidently embracing and addressing some of these issues is really, really encouraging, and we should really be proud of that, because it doesn't happen by accident, and it's through leadership that this has happened and the work of the EDI Council, and I wanted to acknowledge that. And I think the other thing that I've heard very strongly from Carl that it's worth minuting is that this activity is really equality impact assessments in really good working practice and being done properly and organically. So I'd really like to acknowledge that, Max, because I think there's so much work being done in this area. I've worked in equality and diversity all my life, and I'm passionate about it. And really, the work is never, ever done in this area. There'll always be challenges, there'll always be gaps, there'll always be stuff to do. And all we can carry on doing is really continuing to close the gap. And I'm really, really encouraged that we're doing that. But I want to just acknowledge a couple of things specifically, Max, really, through the EDI Council, because I think this stuff doesn't happen by accident. And the EDI Council has significantly influenced this work. And it's through Mel's leadership of that I think that's happened. It's through the work that Mel's done at a place level. It's through the time Mel has put into leading this that's given people the confidence to do it. And it's also about the work Mel has done with our external partners, SOHAL, public health partners and colleagues, and also local council and regional colleagues. So I just wanted that to be minuted, Max, because I'm really, really encouraged by this work. So thank you for the time.
That's important. That is recorded, John. Thank you. Yeah. Karen, shall I bring you in, please?
Thanks, Max. I do love a Carl presentation, and we do get these updates very regularly through Finance Performance. And what I've seen step by step, and we talk about this a lot at F&P, is the brilliant analysis. And Karen's right, we've got more and more data, but actually the analysis just gets deeper and deeper. So the work that's done to understand is threaded throughout the whole trust and all of the trust activity. So it's not just a standalone. And I think it's back to John's point about it's organic, and it should be. It's BAU, it's our bread and butter, that population, and it's right we focus on it, but we focus on it as part of the day job. It's not something separate. And I think the equality impact assessment stuff is right. We're doing that naturally now, which is good, because it means we just put that inequalities lens over all of the work that we do. I'm really, really impressed with the focused action. So, the work that has just been described, and the joined up approach across place, because I think that is really important when you get to core 20+5. And I think it's evidence of the system-based working. And we've talked a lot about place and the system overall. I know less about the EDC other than obviously Mel's updates that come through, but I think governing the EDI that happens with our customers and with our people, and governing all of that stuff together is really important. So back to your point, Max, about People Academy and understanding health inequalities for our people, as well as our customers. There's something for me about that EDC bringing all of that together, because why would you want to talk about that separately? And what I've appreciated more through this session is that trust-wide approach. So it isn't just sitting in Saj's area for Carl to report on. Karen's involved, Ray's involved. So I just think we've grown in this space so much over the last 12 or so months. And I remember the early presentations, and it'd be good to sit and reflect back on those and actually where we've moved to now. Proof of the pudding's always in the eating, and we'll see that in the outcomes. But I really enjoyed reading this presentation over the weekend, and just seeing really how far we've come. Lots of improvement to do, obviously, but just wanted to acknowledge that.
Going the right way, Karen, aren't we? Yeah, thank you. Well said. Yeah. And Julie, please do come in.
Karen said most of it, so thank you, Karen, but got to reinforce great analysis and great work. Well done, everybody.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. Yeah. And Mel, would you like to come in, please?
Yes, thanks. Thanks to Carl. We did have this presentation and a big debate about it at EDI Council. So I won't have to cover it quite so much in my update on that. Just to illustrate the point around the connectivity, because I think, we are not we can do our little bit as an acute organisation. I'm very keen that we see our responsibility as much broader than that, as an anchor institution, not just as a repair centre. So that is my philosophy that I am trying to carry with me into my work as place lead. And I think we can see some real sort of green shoots of where that concept is beginning to get real traction. So the first thing that we decided when we heard it at the EDI Council was we need to take this very presentation into the Partnership Leadership Executive so that our wider partners and the top echelons of the leadership cadre in Bradford District and Craven can hear it too, and recognise our role in this area, but also recognise where we need to connect better. So that's one element. Just an illustration of where that's already happening. Colleagues may have seen quite a prominent piece in the Health Service Journal about the work that we have done in looking at the impact of cost of living. So if you look at the DNA rates in those obstetric areas, part of that is, can people afford to come? Can they afford to charge the phones up so that they get the DNA messages? Can they? All of those impacts we were able to draw from our analysis as part of the 1001 days bit of our children, young people's and families priority, which is the spotlight area for the Health and Care Partnership, because 1001 days is, we used to refer to it as better births, but it's all about the prenatal and the birthing and postnatal period and young adults. So there's a huge amount of connectivity that is in this particular area. So I just wanted to illustrate that because it got a lot of coverage nationally. It's been cited. The Health Service Journal attributed it wrongly. It's not a research project, but it's our learning on the basis of what we will hear about it later in our maternity reports. And we're connecting that to the impacts of the environment in which our women are living. And that's where, you know, you get our response to that is to provide strategies for overcoming the impacts of the cost of living crisis, like the food packages that we give to women, so that hopefully they can make sure that they're eating properly, because we know that's a risk factor in not being able to give birth to healthy babies. So it is very intricately connected, but it's not random, is what I'm saying. It's all joined up. It's all connected. There's a great saying and a great piece of artwork in the Wolfson Centre that says everything is connected, because we are making it so. The second thing is I wanted to just pick up on, I think it's a point that Karen's just made through the people, again illustrating the connectivity, but Karen Dauber mentioned it in walking a little bit in the shoes of our people. So if you think about, we've talked about, and you've signed up to do the Reach In, Reach Out pilot. So our Reach In, Reach Out, Saj was a great illustration yesterday. He donned a stabbed vest. He walked around with the security people. That was his Reach In bit. I don't know where he's going for his Reach Out bit. He might want to tell us what he's got planned for that to happen. But for my Reach Out bit, I went and spent the morning with the NEAT organisation, which is a social enterprise, which is an allotment in Shipley, a massive allotment that is providing opportunities for young people, actually all age people with learning disabilities, to gain skills, confidence, prepare them for the workplace, for them to grow their own food, for them to learn how to cook that food, because they've got kitchens there, for them to create fantastic woodworking and sell that. And in and amongst that conversation, I was able to say, oh, how do you feel about coming to hospital? When you come to hospital, what does it feel like? What could we do better? So armed with that knowledge, I can come back and start to influence internally. And that is about, as far as we are able, we will never do it in reality, but as far as we are able, walking a little bit in the shoes of the people who use our services through the inequalities lens and the challenges that the people of Bradford District and Craven face. So I just want to commend you, and if you haven't signed up to your Reach In, Reach Out experience yet, and you need some help with that, then please do let me know.
Thanks, Mel. Thank you. Cal, thank you very much for everything you do and for the work you've undertaken. You can see the directors are passionate about this. Tackling health inequalities is our primary mission. It's great care for all. And the only way we can do that is by understanding where those gaps are. So thank you for the analysis you're doing and the steer that you are giving us. It's much appreciated. Did you want to have a final word, Cal?
No, just to say thank you and yeah.
It's great. It gives us assurance and it helps us in the decision making that we make, Cal. We are now thinking about the work that's being done here, so much appreciated. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks, Cal. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We'll take a short break now. Karen, I'm conscious you'll have Sarah coming, won't you? I don't think she's on the call yet. I'm assuming perhaps she's on
She's joined us, Max.
Oh, is Sarah with us? Right. Okay. So what we'll do is, obviously, we need to continue with the finance and performance stuff. So, Sarah, would it be too much trouble for you if I said 12:15?
No, that's fine, Max.
Can you hear me okay? Is that okay? Yeah. Should we work to 12:15 to hear from you? Yes. And it'll be up to me to get us back on track then, but that's absolutely fine. That's what I'm here to do. Okay. I've got it as 11:45. Should we get back in at 11:55? Should we just take 10 minutes now for a proper leg stretch, enough time for the kettle to boil, and we'll continue with the finance and performance stuff going to Julie.